Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming. And thanks to Richard May, who's the curator for Odd Mondays Poetry Series, and to Folio Books, that wonderful bookstore in San Francisco. Thanks for the invitation. I'm going to start with my core, though I will read from some other aspects of my endeavors with various aspects of reading and writing. My core being poetry and I guess what you would call narrative poetry for the most part. I'm going to read from this book, which is Having and Keeping. It's published by Brick Road Poetry Press, and it was a runner-up in their national contest. They decided graciously to publish it, and I'm so glad they did because they did a really wonderful job of putting it together. So the first poem I'm going to read two. First poem I'm going to read is a little bit of a memoir, and it is called The Way Things Are in Georgetown. Even the courthouse didn't know where he was buried. She asked if I wanted a copy of his death certificate, but I said I knew he was dead. I just wanted to know where. It was the day before Thanksgiving, near noon, mother in the hospital. My options were running out. Something about getting Dad buried without a headstone was good enough at the time. And then the money ran out, or the concept returned. It was okay for middle-class families not to finish things. The lady at the funeral home might know. They didn't. But they knew who did. I never would have guessed. It was Parks and Recreation in the new building north of the North Branch of the San Gabriel River. So I went in with the basketball players who reminded me of all the reasons why I never played basketball, and the young women about to go swimming who reminded me of. And the woman said, "Sure, honey, it would be in the file cabinet behind the summer baseball schedules." And she brought out the map and pointed to plot number 51. And I went there and stood a long time under the great sycamore tree. And the next one I'm going to read is one that Garrison Keillor picked to read on his program on NPR, Writer's Almanac. I think maybe because he found something in this poem that matched one of his own ideas. It's called Man in the Window. He stands at the window, baffled by pleasure, and how brief it is. Pleasure followed by the memory of pleasure. Light, then dark, with a splinter left in, something like that. The woman in the chair is reading, drinking tea in the ground glass haze of evening. The sudden swell he feels watching her illuminates the past she spent getting to this place. A lover who left, perhaps, time setting her kitchen in order, or maybe gathering artichokes from the field. The moment opens in a diorama of impermanence, seeping away at the edges, even as it is breathed into vision the first time. He holds out his arms. He wants this moment in the body, to feel there the pleasure it holds, and then whatever it is that pleasure leaves behind, which is all he can keep. The strange quality of light dissolving like smoke in air, slipping away in the sun's diminishing gaze. So those are two poems from Having and Keeping, Brick Road Poetry Press. Now I'm going to move along to something a little different. A few years ago, I decided that I was having a lot of fun writing these narrative poems, but there was something I wanted which was apart, wild, quirky, distant. Maybe not the linear way of thinking that narrative poetry always brings, something more associative. And so I investigated and practiced writing in the hypnagogic state, which is between sleep and waking, when the unconscious mind is more active. And that sergeant major of the DLPFC, that part of the brain up here that drives us into a linear thinking daytime, is at rest. And the unconscious can bubble up and create something that you can put down on the page. So I'd write these, look at them the next morning and think, wow, they're crazy. But there was a way of thinking about them, a way of making sense that wasn't linear. It was a different kind of sense making. And so I kept writing these and eventually put them together. And because they were so different, I decided to give it a name of Harvey Ellis, Harvey for my father's first name, Ellis for my mother's maiden name. That kept it separate from the rest of the poems and gave it the freedom to do whatever the heck it wanted to do. So when I read these poems, I put on a hat, something like this, and I change glasses into the rose-colored glasses because maybe there's something about rose coloring that allows you to connect with the deeper parts of consciousness. So you'll hear in these poems a kind of thinking that is not linear, but it has a kind of different kind of making sense. So this first poem, this is from the book Sleep, Not Sleep. You can tell where that came from. And it is called The Round Threshold. As he woke, his mind unbent, like the directions of light coming out of water. Straight was still straight, but flowed from a different point. He could feel the weight of it shift, like the weight of water in an airless tube. Even memory inclined another direction. Reaching back, the image was still there, like rocks on the bottom of a pond, moved, yet where they were. And this one I wrote for my brother after he died. It's called Loss. I hear your cry in the cars on the road, in the night bird, in the unnameable sound the dark makes sliding over us. Were you still with us when the spark was embedding itself? Were you the spark going out? I can take a deep breath if I want to and ease the body of its argument, but you choose to stay with me as the shade I see gathering on the far side of my face. Yeah, so this poem placed in a most imaginative poem of the year contest. I was glad to know that other people can appreciate and recognize this rather strange way of writing. But I think it's undercurrent to all of our thinking. It's just not connected always. So the last one I'm going to read of Harvey Ellis is one called Ancestors. My ancestors surround me like walls of a canyon, quiet, stone-hard. Their ideas drift over me like breezes at sunset. We gather sticks and make settlements. What we do is only partly our own and partly continuation down through the chromosomes. My son, my baby, sleeps behind me, stirring in the night for the touch that lets him continue. He is arranging in his small form the furniture and windows of his home. It will be a lot like mine. It will be a lot like theirs. So that's Harvey Ellis, and that's Sleep, Not Sleep. So now, a little different something. Along about August, while I was minding my own business, in the middle of the pandemic, as much business as I could mind in those moments, I suddenly started to write haiku. Now, I don't know why I started to write haiku. I had no intention earlier of writing haiku. Nobody told me to write haiku. It just sort of happened. But I've come to believe that these packages sometimes come without a return address, and unless you open them up, you don't know what's in them. So yes, I've written, oh my Lord, I've written almost 1,000 haiku since August. I guess you might say I got obsessed. Well, I kind of like doing it. And I brought 7 to read for you. Now, when people read haiku, sometimes they read them twice because there's a lot packed into a very small space and it gives you time to contemplate. So I'm going to read twice the first haiku and the last haiku. The rest, just once at a time. Here's the first. Sudden rain, her yard puddle hooks up with mine. Sudden rain, her yard puddle hooks up with mine. Bluebonnets, the sky reaches underground and pulls up blossoms. Jazz fest, a lot of dissonance in the beer. Hot sun, wipers pushing ash to and fro. Forests crying. The ant runs this way, runs that this way. Make up your mind. Christmas cactus blooming in July. Flower kerfuffle. Here's the last one. In my head, the songs he liked to sing. My brother's grave. In my head, the songs he liked to sing. My brother's grave. So, haiku. We have narrative poems, associative poems, haiku. Now for a different genre. Richard May, who was responsible for putting together these readings, had requested that I be sure and read something from one of my westerns. So that requires a little explanation. I had no intention of writing westerns either, and so someone in England, a publisher, saw something of mine, called me up, said, you should be writing westerns. And I said, I never thought about it. He said, try one anyway. So I did. And when I got into it, I realized, oh, hey, I grew up in Texas. I rode a horse twice a day, milked a cow, shot a gun, knew the people, could talk their language, and understood the terrain. So I was actually pretty much at home writing westerns. It's something like being apart from your history, being better able to write about it, maybe. But as I wrote about westerns, I decided I was going to do it on my own terms. Yes, all the elements of westerns are there. But I also, in this one, which was the most recent one that I have written, Carson Hawk, getting ready for this, I have brought not only those elements of a western into it, but a mystery from the mystery novel genre that has to be solved before the end of it, and also a little love story, something I like to write about. So, okay, Richard, I will read a little bit of this from chapter 1, just to give you a flavor of what this is like. Heard about the bones? The boy was wearing a cowboy hat, so large it looked like a lizard come up under it and tried to walk away. It wobbled when he spoke. Nope, Carson Hawk said, as he drifted his eyes out onto the wide prairie. landing upon a distant windmill way out on Par Hesser's farm. I knew you didn't. Didn't what? Didn't hear, the boy said, 'cause nobody knows. Carson's eyes were still diverted from the boy, an old trick of his, a practice of distancing he used when he didn't want to participate in the current conversation, or was caught in a wide transition of thought, as he was now, in this instance, having to drag himself away from the more pleasant thoughts of Bess Johnson riding by on her dapple gray. Jimmy Fitzhugh eyed Carson's torpor with the curiosity of a pointer trying to make a quail fly. Carson wouldn't fly. But Jimmy wasn't giving up that easy, having trudged the dusty road all the way from Fitzhugh Meadow, up the trail alongside Apache Mound, past Carson's rural mailbox, to find him here on this front porch, his butt glued to his chair, after a mud and sweat day, branding his herd, tuckered out and slow to show signs of life. He could be mistaken for a wooden Indian, a man cemented eternally to his porch, watching the sun go down. You trying to fetch me, boy? The boy removed a sprig of macerated sour grass from his mouth and held it out to the sunshine like he was measuring something. No, sir, he said. Whatever it is you mean by that. Carson regarded the boy with suspicion. Why in Dante's hell would I have to know about some God-forsaken bones? The boy shrugged. Only if and you want to be up to speed. Carson decided to pass on the idea of responding. He didn't have the piss and vinegar necessary. He was more interested, much to his troublesome surprise, in the rest of the story. Try as he may, he couldn't keep away from the idea that these lonely bones belonged to somebody once upon a time, mislaid or hidden somehow. Somebody he might know or might have heard about. Yet there was no way he was going to appear to be interested. Too much do-nothing time needing his attention right now. Don't need any distractions, he said. The boy scowled. So you're just going to sit by and let all that excitement pass on down the road while you brand your cattle and slop the hogs and flatten your sorry duff on that sawback chair of yours? Carson glared plumes of fire at the boy, but the boy didn't melt. Made Carson laugh. You're about the size of a pissant, he said. How could I trust a pissant to tell me anything worth the price of biscuits? The boy was not fazed in the slightest.